Now, this is the lower slope of Culp's Hill, and on the evening of July 2nd, the Confederate Army seizes this position. There will literally be Marylanders shooting against Marylanders over here. Maryland being that unusual state in the Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac, represented on both sides. And you can see right here what's left of Greene's breastworks, that mounded up earth over there. Now, the breastworks were constructed of rocks and trees that had been felled, but later people threw dirt up over top of it, and you can see the mounding up area that represents where it was laid out. And Greene, as a good engineer, knew exactly what he was doing. He zigzagged the line down the hill to create interlocking fields of fire. Talked about Union monuments being very specific and in great numbers, and Confederate memorials tending to be less in number and more generalized. And here's the exception to that rule. This is a Confederate monument to honor the 2nd Maryland Infantry, but it's a Confederate unit here that seized the base of Culp's Hill. This is the first Confederate monument on the battlefield. This is the upper slope of Culp's Hill. You can see the trench line that was laid out. That monument right there and the one further down and this one right here are honoring part of Greene's troops that did not leave Culp's Hill to go over and help out General Sickles. They stayed, and they kept Confederates storming up this hill after dark. You can imagine what it was like trying to come up this hill into Union troops that were behind earthworks. If I'm Robert E. Lee, I've been in Gettysburg for 2 days, and I've beaten the Union Army up pretty badly. I've got them on the ropes. I'm not going to go back to Virginia after the second day. I'm going to stay one more day and try and finish the job. I think about it overnight. I've mauled the Union Corps on both ends of that fishhook formation, so on the morning of July 3rd, I figure I'll just pick up the attack and continue where I left off at dusk. Attack both ends. When the Union Army launches that 7-hour offensive at 4 a.m. from the Baltimore Pike to our left over against Culp's Hill, that makes Lee change his plans. He can't attack both ends now because he's already got a fight over here to deal with. So he decides by mid-morning that instead of attacking both ends, he will go up against the very center of Meade's position, which he figures has to be the weak position at this point. So that will set the stage for what history remembers as Longstreet's assault of General Trimble, Pettigrew, and Pickett, or what most history books just refer to as Pickett's Charge, where Lee will mass 150 Confederate cannons all along Seminary Ridge, where the North Carolina and the Virginia monuments are located. He will target the center of the Union line, where an angle in a farmer's fence line marked by a small stand of trees just beside it called the Copse of Trees. The trees being the marker of the center of the line, the angle being the focal point of the attack. After he's softened up the center with artillery, he's going to send 3 divisions of roughly 13,000 Confederate troops across the open fields to wedge their way through. Now, he's got cavalry back at this point. Jeb Stuart, who has not been a factor in this battle at all, has now rejoined Lee's army on July 2nd. Stuart will be sent around the town of Gettysburg with orders to guard my left flank. Well, Stuart's already in trouble for not being here for most of the campaign, so he's going to be out there. Stuart is basically going to be sitting out there and will ultimately try and get behind the Union lines and will run headlong into a division of Union cavalry about 3.5 miles behind us in what's referred to in the park map as East Cavalry Field. At the same time Pickett's Charge is taking place, Stuart and David Gregg will be engaged in a tremendous cavalry battle over there, which really does not change anything over here. It does not alter the outcome of this battle. And if you're a cavalry fan, it's also interesting because over there we got an officer by the name of George Armstrong Custer who takes the Michigan Brigade of Cavalry and charges right into Stuart's ranks. This is the widow Leicester's house. This is where General Meade makes his headquarters. Right up there is the Visitor Center. That's the cyclorama painting, and we're directly behind the angle or the center of the Union line that's right here. There's the statue to General Meade that we were looking at from the North Carolina monument about a mile away. We're now right behind it. If I'm General Meade and I take a look at my situation after 2 days at Gettysburg, I say, well, on the first day we got manhandled pretty badly by the Confederate Army of Robert E. Lee, but I wasn't here. I was still to the south, so it was junior grade officers making most of the decisions, not senior officers at this point. We got beaten up pretty badly, mostly through good luck rather than by poor fighting on our part. On the second day, I laid out this well-crafted defensive perimeter, 3.5 miles long. I had plenty of men and ammunition to man my line, and I was prepared to sit tight and let the Confederates attack me. What happens? I got a political general who decides on his own authority to stick himself out on the Emmitsburg Road, and because of that, I have to shuffle troops for the next 4 or 5 hours. I move men all over the battlefield. I get beaten up pretty badly again. I lose a lot of men as casualties. But in the final analysis, I still am basically holding that same 3.5 mile line. I've lost the base of Culp's Hill, but I still hold the summit. I've kept a little round top, and I've hurled back Confederates that have basically worked their way up onto Cemetery Hill. I've driven them off. I'm not going to leave either. I'm not going to move further south and take up a new defensive position. I'm going to sit tight and hold my line out here, and that's going to set the stage for Pickett's charge. On day 3 of the battle, still hoping to achieve a complete victory here, Lee will attack that same fishhook formation, not from both ends, but from the very center in what history remembers as Pickett's charge, which basically he will mass artillery and infantry right here where we're standing and go right across this mile of open field towards a Copse of Trees, which is that stand right there, and try and go right through the center of the Union line and break it open.
So this is where they massed from Pickett's charge.
And actually, Pickett massed to the south of us. This is where Johnston Pettigrew, who now commands
North
Percy
Carolina
Pender's division, they were right here. And that's why, in part, the North Carolina monument goes on, depicting North Carolinians who are about ready to go across this field to attack the very center of the Union line.
Can you see the angle from here?
Sure. That Copse of Trees that's right behind the bus now is the Copse of Trees. See the lone standing tree that the bus is passing in front of right there?
Right.
That stands right in the angle. There's Army troops out here re-walking part of Pickett's charge. They're actually they're walking it as part of Brockenbrow's Virginia regiment or brigade, which was on the extreme left end of the line. Pickett's charge is really 3 divisions. Pickett, Trimble, and Trimble's divisions out here. Trimble and Pettigrew sort of get forgotten in the history of all this. It just gets remembered as Pickett's charge, but it should be Pickett, Trimble, and Pettigrew's charge of Longstreet's assault, because he was the guy in charge of it. Although you have to remember, Longstreet didn't like the battle plan for day 2 at all. He doesn't want to be anywhere near the idea of Pickett's charge on day 3. He doesn't like that concept at all. And we'll do Pickett's charge from over there, looking back over here. Here's your Copse of Trees. The angle is formed by the stone wall in front of it. There's the single tree further to the north that marks that angle. Now, that tree wasn't there in 1863. They decided just to leave it there. It's a good marker, I guess. These are descendants of the ones that were there. Okay, we're going to make one more stop, and I'll show you where those North Carolinians from the 26th of North Carolina said they got. There's the Virginia monument that we drove around with Robert E. Lee up on the top of it. The North Carolina monument is right over here beyond this tall green pine tree. Seminary Ridge, we're standing on Cemetery Ridge. There's the Farmer's Wall, marking the boundaries of Pius Small's field over here. The farmers own this land. There's the angle that everybody talks about at Gettysburg. Inner angle, outer angle. There's the Copse of Trees, little round top directly to the south of us. If you look between the tall monument and the green cypress tree, you can see that monument that we were standing next to on the top of Little Round Top. This is the Emmitsburg Road that cuts right to the battlefield. The peach orchard is right out there along the Emmitsburg Road to the left of that red barn that stands down there, just over the kids that are walking out there. The bombardment starts at about 1, probably goes till about 2:30 or so. At the same time, now Union cannons start to roar back in return fire. 80 Union cannons return the fire. So much noise being generated, people as far away as Philadelphia and Pittsburgh would claim that they could hear the distant rumble of the cannonade in Gettysburg. Low-frequency vibrations being carried. If I'm a Union soldier in Hancock's 2nd Corps, I'm behind these stone walls. All I'm going to do at this point is hunker down for any cover I can. This is all I've got. We have not dug trenches over here like they did over on Culp's Hill. The shells rain in, so much gunpowder is going off that very quickly this entire plain fills up with smoke. The gunners on the Confederate side now begin to overshoot the ridge. Shells are coming in, but they're not disrupting the center of the Union line as anticipated. They're inflicting damage to reserve troops in areas behind the main line. Union gunfire is actually doing more damage than sending shells through the woodlot, sending branches down on all the Union Confederate troops that are now being sequestered in those wood lines over there in preparation to coming out of the line and attacking. At about 2:30, as the gunfire begins to slacken, Union soldiers kind of stand up. You kind of get the feeling they're kind of brushing all the dust and the mud and the thrown up rock shards off them. They look out across these fields. There's nobody close enough to be shooting at them with rifles at this point. they look over there and talk about this magnificent sight of 13,000 Confederate troops coming out of the tree line, unfurling their battle flags, and forming a line of battle that's roughly over a mile in length from one end to the other. If you go to the Virginia Monument and go slightly to the left, that's the